Okay. Okay, so last week we discussed the pasuk that Rebbe Zal opens the teaching with. I'm going to do a brief recap of what we talked about last week, and we'll continue inside. We can translate this verse from the songs of David HaMelech according to the concept in the teaching of Likutey Moharan. The Ashrei Tamimei Darech refers to those who are good at stuff. One way of being happy in life is to just be good at stuff and be able to get the job done. And great, you can find a certain degree of happiness that way, but that's not really a novel teaching. I think we knew that. Another way of being happy is Ashrei Hahoylechim B'Torah Hashem. Those who follow in Hashem's supernatural guidance are also able to find happiness. Okay, so then Rebbeinu Zal starts with the word da, which we have a tradition in the Likutei Moharan. Whenever he says da, which loosely translates to you should know, it's know as an instruction, he's going to tell you something you don't know already based on what you've read. And he goes on to say that, well, what is it about the Torah that brings happiness? That the Torah causes all your prayers to be answered. So this is an incomparable difference between the people who are just good at doing stuff in the world and finding they want the car and they work hard and they get the money and they buy the car. There's no comparison between that and someone whose prayers are answered right away. As I invited everyone to do last week, I'll invite everyone to take a second and imagine, if you can, which I propose maybe you can't because it might even be unimaginable, what the world would be like if your prayers instantly came true. Always, every one of them. Might not even be entirely desirable because maybe I made a prayer and I didn't realize that I made a prayer and then it comes true right away. So at the very least, the prayers that I intended to make, if those came true right away, that would be something sort of unimaginable. So maybe that's why Rebbe Nachman starts the teaching with the word da, that we're going to learn something that we didn't learn before. Okay. So what is it about the Torah that causes this effect? Rebbe Nachman is going to explain the mechanism by which the Torah causes all of our prayers to be answered. There are two factors that he identifies in Likutey Moharan as Chen and Chashivus. Chen, I'll translate them in a very commonly understandable way. Chen is likability, and Chashivus is things we should be concerned about. So if we're better liked by other people and within ourselves, and even that our prayers are received with more kindness, Hashem likes our prayers, and also if we're taken seriously, because if a person is just liked, we don't necessarily do what he says, and if a person is taken seriously but not liked, we might do what he says, but we might run when he comes in the room. So someone has to have both Chen and Chashivus, likability and respectability, to have their request fulfilled. And the Torah has the effect of increasing these factors in a person. The Torah is compared to Ayelas Ahavim V'Ya'alis Chen. Again, I'm doing a review here. I'm going to identify where we're holding in the text when we go forward in the text. An Ayelas is simply, it's a type of musical instrument. It's like everybody likes the lead guitar player. It's a musical instrument that attracts people to like. The word Ayelas itself is based on the letters of one of the names of Hashem, Aleph Lamed, that refers to Chesed, that refers to kindness and increase. And the root of the word in regular language means to agree, or to cause things to agree. The one thing that the Torah does is that there are a lot of different opinions found in the Torah, and one power that it gives us is the ability to work out the differences and see how it's not really a disagreement after all. They're not actually opposites. They're referring to different situations, something like that. So then Rebbeinu Zal gives us 4 instructions of how we can increase in our ability to learn the Torah in such a way that it increases our qualities of likability and respectability. The first step is that we need to look upon the intelligence in all things Again, I'll remind that we mentioned a little bit of Kabbalah last time, that Chen and Chashivus, likability and respectability, come from the sides of Chesed and Gevurah, of what we would identify in our personal lives as good and bad, as desirable and undesirable situations. And generally speaking, by default settings, this is how we consider things. We encounter a situation, and the first thing we do is we determine if it's a good or a bad situation, and everything else how else we relate with the situation follows from that. So again, Rebbe Nachman starts the lesson with the word da. There's something we don't know before. There's another way to look at things. So that's to look at the intelligence in all things. So first, we can just take in any situation, well, this is what's going on here. What are some interesting things about this situation? What are some appreciable things about this situation? Someone asked me in the class last time, if I'm driving there's a certain road in the city where we live in Sfas in Israel, where there's only one lane. It's a narrow road, and people will sometimes stop their cars, get out of their cars, order a sandwich, and everybody else is stuck behind their line. So it seems like kind of a frustrating situation. So one way we could apply this teaching of looking upon the intelligence in all things is to just remark on, well, isn't it amazing that we're able to even do that? A guy is able to stop his car and get out and order a sandwich. You can't do that on the major highways. There's just no way you could possibly do that. So it's sort of a novel situation that I'm in at this moment. I guess if I wanted to get out and order a sandwich, I could do it too. It's an interesting situation that reality exists at all. And so then Rebbeinu Zal says that we have to, when I say Rebbeinu Zal, by the way, it refers to Rebbe Nachman. He says we have to connect ourselves with the intelligence that's in all things. Looking upon the interesting things in a situation is something that somebody could just kind of zone out on all day. Just sit there all day and comment on all the interesting things, but it's not the end goal. It's only the first step. There's another step, which is to connect with that and to realize that there is a general appreciatability. If I'm able to appreciate any little thing about the situation, it is because every detail of the situation is under every detail of the situation is a general appreciatability. Some situations seem to have all good, and some situations seem to have all bad. But one thing that all situations share is appreciatability. I can always stop and just comment on interesting things about the situation that I don't necessarily feel strongly or bad or good. That will connect me to the fact that there is an underlying appreciatability that is not a distinction of good and evil. It's not a fight of this versus that. It's just appreciatability. And that is from where all things, at least in this world, come. In Kabbalah, from this general appreciatability. In the Hebrew word that Rebbeinu Zal uses as chachma. And why should we do that? The next step is in order to illuminate the intelligence that is with all things. So that with time, as we apply this teaching, this is how we will by default settings come to see things. As opposed to initially judging them, which is not emphasizing the intelligence with them when we initially judge something, it's emphasizing sort of our own gut reaction to the situation. We're just looking at ourselves. Our own gut reaction, not even our whole self, just our gut reaction. That's when we look at the good and the bad. But when simply what is starts to arise first, this creates a light. From there, we can find truer things to like and truer things to be concerned about. We're not saying that one should not at any point assess what is good and bad about a situation. It's just that isn't the first step. There's something that underlies the good and bad. We have to know what the situation is. So there Rebbeinu Zal writes, and I'm going to we're starting to enter the text a little bit more. Kidei sheya'er loy haseichel sheyesh b'chol davar, to bring light to the intelligence that's in all things. So that's the first thing that we see. And through our interaction with others, that becomes the first thing that other people see. And that we affect a fix in the world that there are things that people like in the world in general that maybe, if you really thought about it, shouldn't be liked quite so much. And there are other things that people are very worried about in the world that maybe there are other things they could be more worried about if they were tuned more in with the actual reality of the situation as opposed to the gut impulses. So this is a great rectification in the world to elevate what we like and don't like. And we do that by looking first to the intelligence. And what does that do? That connects us with Hashem. The ultimate, what's the best possible thing you could like? What's the best possible thing is Hashem. It wouldn't be much of a God if it wasn't the best possible of whatever quality you want to put forward. What is the ultimate thing to be concerned about to make sure that I'm doing the rules properly? And well, maybe the creator and master of the universe who runs every step of the universe. That would seem to be the most sort of all-permeating concern that would include all other concerns in it.
I think it will help if you give another example of your own, where you use intelligence to help you to see the situation in different perspective, in Rebbe Nachman's perspective. Can you share something with us?
Another situation, sure. So there were many reasons to engage in kiruv, in the recruitment of non-religious Jews into and non-religious people into appreciating the Yiddishkeit, and there's just a lot to appreciate about it, the Yiddishkeit, the Torah, and one could say that all these reasons are external, that I think I'm doing it for them or something, or that I'm gaining more support for my movement. But another way to look at it is that there is some personal service in it, that I'm actually elevating, I'm improving myself, I'm making myself more godly by undergoing this effort in recruitment. So this is a common situation that comes up where we miss the train, and then it turns out there's someone on the train platform who it turns out they're Jewish and they've never put on tefillin before, and we have an opportunity to give them a book, and they're in a difficult time in life, and we just happen to have a stack of little books in our pocket that they're going to open, and this is going to completely turn around their situation. This is a very common example. Is even if we aren't people that go out and intentionally engage in recruitment all the time, we don't have like a table set up and we're not like beckoning people to come to us, but we have a stack of books in our bag because you never know. This is one easy way to connect with the godliness in every situation, because just about every time you miss the bus, there's some guy that could use a hand who's there, who could use a little book or something. Okay. Now we receive sort of a warning statement here that the intelligence in all things, which by the way is only, it serves connecting us with Hashem, but it in and of itself, the intelligence, well, that's not the end goal. The appreciation of little details about some situation is not the end goal. And it makes a great light in all pathways. So we should make an effort to connect to the appreciatability for the sake of seeing that there is an underlying intelligence and making that sort of the default setting that we look at the intelligence. But it would be easy to kind of zone out and get lost in the first step. So this is why I think one of the reasons that Rebbe Nachman tells us, by the way, this is a very powerful light. We're later in this same lesson going to learn how to channel this light a little bit and make it something that we can not get lost in. It is written in one of the books of Shlomo HaMelech, King Shlomo, that a man's power of appreciation enlightens his face. Why is it everywhere? Because you actually change your own face, both the information you give out and the information that you receive. Because all the information you give out and receive, pretty much, as a speaking human being, comes through your face. Okay, so this brings us to the story of Jacob and Esau. And I was asked for an example, so this is a really good example. I'll review the story. We started going to the story at the end of last lesson, so this is what we'll pick up with this lesson. Jacob and Esau had an evil brother, and he had a very powerful father. And the blessings of the father of Jacob and Esau could give someone the power to rule the world. So it would be important that his brother, his evil brother, not get too many of these blessings. Yaakov had a job to do to save the world, essentially, by getting as many of these blessings as he possibly could. And this was a hard task for Jacob because he was a humble man, and his brother was not humble. And that's one of the differences between them that affected the good and evil balance. But there was one little problem. We have a law about who gets the majority of the blessings, and it's the firstborn son, and that was not Yaakov. So how do you change that situation? What are you going to do? Go back in time? There's not so. Whatever situations we have, probably in our life, most of our situations we have, probably the fate of the world is not riding on them. Let's say even that it is. Is there any way we could possibly, by regular means in the world, change this situation of not being born first? Not that's been invented yet that I'm aware of. Even sci-fi movies that have time machines in them, it's a question. Well, is it actually the same guy who went back in time, or he just erased the first guy? It's a different, similar guy who appeared at the point in time. So that wouldn't work because then it wouldn't be the son of his father if it's a different guy. So he has to acquire this birthright. So how does he do it? The first thing he looks at is, well, I need to get the firstborn son right. So what is first? What is this thing of firstness? Before I say, I need to get the firstborn son, and that's not me. This is a bad situation. Before that, well, let's see, what does first exactly mean? So we said before that our default settings are to judge a situation before looking at just sort of the objective things about the situation. So the objective things about the situation come before that which can be judged about it. The appreciatability of a situation, the openly looking at the situation, comes before any sort of judgment. So this is one element of firstness. There's another quality of firstness that's brought out by the words here that it says also in the songs of David HaMelech, Reishis Chachma, which means that the appreciatability of things comes first. But it also means that there's something else in here. We said before that the point of connecting with the intelligence of things is not for the sake of just connecting with the intelligence of things. There is a cause there is a reason that underlies that, which is to connect with the fact that there is an underlying appreciatability about all things, which is sort of a godly idea. Now we're talking about something that's all pervasive, which is not like good and bad. Some things are good, some things are bad. Good and bad are not all pervasive qualities. Appreciatability is an all pervasive quality. But even that is not the main point, just to see something that's all pervasive, like the force or something. We're not stopping at the force here. So there's something that precedes that. What precedes that is this rectification that we're trying to make in the world. This is just according to the sequence in which Rebbe Nachman writes these instructions. The purpose of connecting with the appreciatability of all things is to illuminate that. So fixing the problem of people liking and being concerned about the wrong things in life is that we will make that the intelligence in all things is the first thing that people connect with. And that sort of fixes the problem of the hastily arrived upon likes and dislikes. So there's an underlying cause to looking at the chachma, looking at the appreciability. But making a tikkun olam and changing the public thought to like and dislike better quality things, this also is not ultimately the end goal because, Hashem is the one that made all these things. So if we want anything good, we should go to the source of good. So ultimately the purpose of all these goals is to connect with an infinite that we can't say that there's anything before. So this brings out another detail about what appreciatability really means. By the way, I'm translating appreciatability, chachma, in kind of an idea way, but usually the way people translate it simply is wisdom. They're looking to, well, what is the very first thing? What is the reason we're here? What's the reason for that reason and the reason for that reason? And not really giving up on that line of thought. What's the main important thing here? What's the main important thing about that? Until we arrive that we can't answer the question any other way than saying that it's Hashem.
So when you look at the intelligence of something, you're saying look at from God's perspective how he might have, what it might be serving him, the situation that you can't quite understand why it's happening.
Mm-hmm.
In what way is this situation serving Hashem? Is that the intelligence of the thing?
Well, first of all, we can't look at things from Hashem's intelligence. We can only look at things from our own intelligence. To contemplate, well, what is the purpose of this to Hashem? Well, that's very nice for Hashem, but what about me? So I think that Rabbeinu Zal is teaching us how to find sort of our own grounds in the situation. What is my purpose in the situation? What am I to be doing here? What am I to notice in the situation? And to notice is a very important point here. It says in the Zohar that Hashem and the Torah are bound up as one. It says in other Sfar, I think it says in the Tanya, the founding book of Chabad, that when we learn the Torah, we're binding our mind with Hashem's mind. That the Torah literally is Hashem's mind. And so when we engage our mind in that, it's like we are one. There is a unity that we have with Hashem in that moment. So what does actually Jacob Avinu do? Well, I mean, the short answer is he found sort of a loophole in Torah law. Well, okay, so if Esau, my evil brother, gets the birthright, there's nothing I can do to change him getting it. All I need to do is get him to give it to me. Why would he do that? It's the ultimate blessings in the world. So as the story famously goes, his evil brother was coming home from a long day of pillaging and doing other sorts of evil things out in the field, and he comes home and he's hungry. And he says that he's hungry, and he sees that Yaakov is cooking. Let's say it's his favorite food, red lentils. And Esau says, "Give me some of that red." Doesn't even say the name of the food. He only says that red. The most superficial possible quality about this food is that it is the color red. And so from that, Yaakov knew that, he's really interested in the most superficial possible thing here. When this guy's stressed out at the end of the day and it's really no nonsense, what does he want? He wants the most superficial possible thing. Now, these blessings from their father, they don't actually get these blessings until their father passes away, so essentially the blessings in that moment were worthless. They would be worth the fate of the world later on. They were the entire world later on, but not in that moment. What was in that moment? Lentils.
Red one.
So yeah, red lentils. Let me take it. Maybe he planned it out a little bit. It says Esau had red hair, and so Esau was the most superficial possible person, and Yaakov was the most deep possible person. That's when we can kind of straighten out these archetypes in our own life and how we observe other people and things like this. Superficiality comes from the side of Esau. Initially judging things comes from the side of Esau. He already said it was red. Why does he need to say it's red again? By the way, before he said, "Give me that red," he said, "I'm exhausted." He immediately put a judgment on the situation. Then said, "Give me some of that red." Okay, so Yaakov knew, this will be an easy deal. He'll agree to give me these blessings that are not worth anything for however many years from now, when they will eventually be worth the entire world, in exchange for a bite of food. So he made the deal. So it was a very simple arrangement that he made, but it's just because he had to look at the situation in terms of the intelligence, basically in terms of how does the Torah look at the situation, rather than how does he, in that particular moment with his own difficulties, look at the situation. Okay, so then what did Yaakov? What did his brothers say in response to that? He said, "You Yaakoved me 2 times." Yeah, Yaakov is his name. Again, Esau is extremely superficial. Yeah, you Yaakover, you Yaakov to me. So by the way, the word Yaakov, Akov, it refers to the heel, and of course, when they were both in the womb at the same time, and Yaakov, even at that time, he was a very smart lad. He tried to stop his brother from coming out first by holding on to his ankle. It didn't work though because Esau was very strong physically, and but this word of Akov, it refers to like you held me back, you pushed me back, you made me secondary, you pushed me down, you beat me. Now remember that the Torah is told as a narrative. It says in the Zohar that woe be to the man that only views the story as a narrative. It only views the Torah as a narrative. It is a narrative that includes within it laws, which are a deeper level, and includes within it secrets and lessons. But woe be to the man who only considers it to be a narrative. Because according to that guy, what happened to Esau? Esau got pushed down. But remember that Yaakov was saving the world by doing this stunt. So then Onkelos, who was one of the first translators in a major way of the Torah, and of course any translation has some degree of explanation in it, he translates that as you wisdomed me twice, or you used your power of appreciation to beat me 2 times. So now we're actually saying that Yaakov did something good, as opposed to Esau got the short end of the stick. Well, the other side of that formula is that Yaakov got the long end of the stick. And Yaakov, he's the good guy. So if Yaakov gets the blessing to save the world, that makes a better world. Guess what? It makes a better world for Esau also. So for Yaakov, the good guy, the situation is possibly win-lose. He doesn't look at it that way, but it's possibly win-lose. For Esau, it's a win-win situation. Either he gets the blessings, or he doesn't get the blessings, which is actually better for him. But he has to look at it in the way that the Torah would look at it. At least to zoom out and look at it as a narrative. But then if he looks at it not only as if he looks at it as just a narrative, he says, this will actually be good for the fate of the world, including me and my descendants. That a good guy is going to rule the world. It's actually a good thing. The other thing is that if he looks at it from a legalistic standpoint, a deeper level of the Torah laws, he says, actually Yaakov did not fool me at all. What he did was a perfectly legitimate exchange. And I did actually have a stronger desire for those lentils in the moment than I did for the blessings that would eventually come. So this is actually a totally okay situation. But that isn't what Esau said in the situation, because remember that Esau has to play the role of the epitome of superficiality. Okay, so this relates to the sun. We can compare appreciatability to the sun in that it's everywhere, all the time. It can cause one guy to go up and one guy to go down if you put your sunscreen on or not. The sunscreen here is that I'm going to look upon the appreciatability of the situation as opposed to being the one who judges the situation. The sun can be all other energy in the world at some point had to get energy from the sun. Well, how'd you build your nuclear plant? Well, you needed sunlight at some point in that process to get your feet on the ground, to see what you're doing, maybe. So this appreciatability underlies all other successes. So by the way, it isn't the choice of do I judge the situation or do I appreciate it. No. Once you appreciate it, you'll be later in a place where you can judge very well the situation. That the path of tzaddikim, of the good and righteous, like Yaakov, is like contact light. I'll explain that in a moment. That continues on and lights up the whole day. Or Noiga, the most simple definition of Or Noiga is the beam of light that comes out in the morning to indicate to you that it's daytime. The sun does not turn on like a light switch. From our experience, we know it goes around the world. I'm not arguing with that. And it's, by the way, it's an amazing thing that it goes around the world and that it doesn't just flip to one side or something, because that would be tremendously uncomfortable. if like it would be like every morning I woke up by having a bucket of cold water dumped on me or something like that. What do all the plants do? They like gradually work their way around over to they follow the sun. And if the sun just boom, it's all sunlight, just all of a sudden now, they break their stems. It couldn't be how would you have a functional world that way? So this is one advantage of tzaddikim. What did Esau do in the situation? Is he just came in and made a big announcement and he took over the room. I'm Esau and I'm tired. Give me food. And Yaakov was already there preparing, building up from something small to something large. And this is a very important lesson for us in this endeavor of looking upon the intelligence and all things, because it seems like I'm not getting a big effect right away. But of course, you have to build up. By the way, there's another detail in this. It's already something probably you all know, that to accomplish anything, you need to start with something small and it'll grow from there. I think everybody knows that. But we're not saying necessarily from this lesson alone that, and you have to deal with frustrations and obstacles and things like that. Because this is one of the advantages of smallness, is that you can actually save yourself some of that grief by not trying to jump the gun. It's explained in another teaching in Likutey Moharan and Likutey Malchus that one of the roots of all evil, and there are many identifications of the root of all evil in Torah, which is great because there's many ways to essentially make an entirely good world if you can just eliminate this root of all evil. This particular one is jumping the gun, doing things out of a feeling of being pressured for time. We can still do things quickly. That doesn't mean that we're doing them quickly because we feel pressed for time. We're doing them quickly because we have a lot of energy, we have a lot of life force, because we built up from something small and manageable that can sort of undermine the obstacles. Yaakov didn't have to argue with his brother at all. There was no obstacle really to getting this birthright.
Can I just ask,
Sure.
how do you reconcile that with the incredible cry, retrospectively, that he has? I mean, you
Incredible cry.
the cry that Esau cried when he realized what had happened.
Well, Esau does have to deal with obstacles in a major way. Esau is a very contentious person, and so he went in immediately judging, and then you want to judge, you get something else to judge. So Yaakov didn't have to deal with obstacles in exchange, but Esau definitely did. Now,
could you argue that this is Geneva Dat, that you're actually extracting something from an individual who is not realizing at the time the value that this is, and retrospectively, is that Geneva Dat?
If Esau was thinking in terms of what's actually going on here, then he probably could have made that claim. And Yaakov knew full well that Esau, by the way, Esau was a wise scholar. It's brought in Midrashim that he would ask his father questions like, how do you tithe salt, knowing full well that salt is not tithe, in order to sound like he was being a big pious guy. And so it's recognized that he was very knowledgeable. If he wasn't knowledgeable, then it would seem like taking advantage of him. The other thing is that it isn't just a story. Remember that these are archetypes. This tells us about how things go in reality, that both guys being powerful, smart guys, the guy who doesn't judge the situation gets through the situation with less agony, and the guy who does judge the situation has to judge it at every step. What does it mean, mitzvah gereris mitzvah, vera gereris vera? The guy who enters looking at the intelligence in the situation gets to keep doing so, and the guy who enters judging the situation also gets to keep doing so, unless he changes his decision and decides to start looking at the intelligence situation. Okay. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the word chen, the actual breakdown of the physical word chen, how it's spelled in Hebrew. Of course, it's a somewhat well-known secret about Hebrew that the world is made of the Hebrew letters. So the name of anything in Hebrew represents its sort of the divine thought that underlies it. It's the shape it's going to take and the purpose it'll form and all the qualities it'll have, and all the things that we'll do with it throughout the course of history. So too with the word chen, which is the word for likability. So the first letter of the word chen is the letter ches, which Rebbe Nachman equates with the property of Chiyus, which is life force and energy. The first thing that Esau said when he walked in the room is, "I'm exhausted." And Yaakov, I mean, it's not like Yaakov necessarily hadn't been doing anything, but Yaakov never makes any sort of statement about his own what kind of feeling I have at this moment, if I feel good or bad. He doesn't. It isn't only about judging externally, but also when we apply a judgment to ourselves, then immediately the life force that we're receiving gets constricted to match that judgment. Oh, I see. You want to make judgments? Okay, here you go. Hashem will agree with your judgment in that way.
By saying I'm exhausted, Hashem makes you exhausted.
Right.
Is that what you're saying?
Right. Esau drains his own chiyus, his own life force by staying that he is exhausted. And by the way, if someone says something good, also, it says, "I'm so proud of myself." Or I see. So your life force should be issued in terms of pride. And now, if you should encounter a situation where you did something you weren't as proud of, you will now not have life force. You'll feel drained and you will have it because of that. So the alternative to that is to look upon the intelligence in all things. And Rebbe Nachman states directly here that the intelligence in all things is the life force in all things. That is the source of energy all the time. Whether I have a high and I have a big moment, I did a big performance or something, and that's why I feel good. And so then if I don't have that, I feel bad. Or it's just a low, I just straight up said that I feel bad, and okay, so well now I feel bad. If I just look at the situation in an objective way, where I'm connecting with just things about the situation and how all those things are sit atop a layer of appreciatability, I will get life force from that. And I can do that in all situations. And I won't have to struggle in the same way as someone who gets tired. But because the light of intelligence is very strong, as we said before, a person can zone out on the interesting things about a situation, and they can do it for a long time and not get tired from doing it because it's interesting and it actually is energizing. But it's a very great light. And a person can lose their track of where they're supposed to be going by connecting with the intelligence, and it's very compelling force. So Rebbe Nachman says that it is not possible to really get it in a way that is truly beneficial, that isn't just sort of a trap, without the other letter of the word chen, the word likability, which is the letter nun. The letter nun represents Malchus, the quality of accomplishing things in the world. We had the first question in this teaching maybe would even go on the teaching of David HaMelech, that happy are those who are good at stuff in the world, happy are those who walk in the path of Hashem. Well, how does walking in the path of Hashem exactly do anything in the world that they would have any happiness from? Are we saying they're just getting high off Torah or something? What exactly effect would this have? So here's what he starts to say. Well, if we're going to channel this cognitive process we described before into something manifest, we need the second part of it, which is nun.
Just remind us what the chet was then.
The chet is the intelligence itself in all things, and the intelligence itself gives us life force.
And the nun?
So we're just starting to explain the nun. The nun is the channel by which anything will actually happen as a result of this lesson. It will happen in a way of that it's connected with the intelligence in all things, and in a way of the good and bad, and it will be elevated goods and elevated things to be concerned about. There's a verse also in the songs of King David. It says that if we're going to stand before the sun, then we must have this quality of, and I'm going to get stuff done. again, I'm loosely translating the text as we go. If anybody's following in the text, Lifnei Shemesh Yinoyin Shmoy, Perish Rashi L'Shen Malchus. Yinoyin is L'Shen Malchus. And so this is comparable to the moon, because the moon does not make any light of its own. It only...
It was the sun.
Nechet is the sun, right? And noon is the moon. It only receives what it gets from the sun. This is a known thing. We see the light, the moon, because it reflects sunlight, right? So, why would someone fall into the trap of zoning out on just sort of the interestingness of reality? One answer is that they get a lot of life force from that. But if I were to suddenly get a lot of life force, I would want to go do stuff with it. That's what I feel now. But that's because right now I'm not in the trap of being like zoned out in the appreciatability zone here. So what will cause a person to get trapped there? Well, it's that they're still bringing their own thoughts and stuff to it. There's still a lot of self to sort of enjoy this feeling of being interested in receiving life force from just the pure feeling of interest and appreciation. But we have to remember that we don't make any of this, we're not creating the fact that things are interesting. We're using a power that's already there. This bridges the gap a little bit for us between the first and second step, which was somewhat vague before. Well, how exactly does appreciating things around me lead me to conclude that there is an all-encompassing appreciatability about all things? How do I know I'm not just making up things that it isn't coming from me? So just like everything around us was created by Hashem, and the appreciatability that is within all things was created by Hashem, so too by me, myself. I didn't make myself. Hashem made me. So whatever is appreciable about me, or whatever appreciating I can do, is because Hashem put it there. And so this precludes the kind of like getting zonked by the interestingness of things, because we don't have as much sort of animal self to like just enjoy the buzz of it. So then we just have this pure, more purposeful self of like, oh, well, how am I going to use this energy now? Am I going to save the world by acquiring the birthright from my evil brother, whatever the situation is here? I'm going to create some sort of program for people that want sandwiches on the road so that they can call in or something before and get their sandwiches quickly, and then it doesn't hold up traffic. But still, this interesting reality that we can just be driving and we instantly have a sandwich with no need for a drive-through is there. Right? There could be some, whatever the reality is, there could be some elevated form of that reality that wouldn't have within it the frustrations, but would still have within it the good things about the situation, the interesting things about the situation that could be good if they weren't bedraggled. But this is what we say, that we're not saying we should never judge things. It's just that there's a step of appreciating that comes first.
Why would we need the moon? I'm not quite following. Why would we need the moon?
Because otherwise we just get high off the interestingness of things.
And what's wrong with that?
It doesn't get anything. It doesn't actually save the world from Esau. It only does the first step and maybe sort of the second step. The first step being appreciating, the second step realizing that there is an all-encompassing appreciatability. If I'm getting zonked out looking at the appreciatability of the situation, part of the reason is because I think there's something about this situation that is more appreciable than the next situation, than any other situation in the world. But because the appreciatability of all things is something that Hashem put there and is all-encompassing, I don't need to worry that I'm not going to have my buzz anymore if I keep going with my day and get things done. And take whatever situation. I can still go on to actually judge the situation and determine, well, what in this, now that I've looked at it objectively and I've gotten a little bit of life force sort of as a reward for that, I can now reinvest this life force in situations and say, well, what are the good things about this? What are the not good things? How do we increase the good things in the situation or without increasing the not good things? Or how do we decrease the bad, get rid of the bad parts of the situation and still keep the good things? Because we do want to progress and improve, like as a society. If we were to say, okay, so let's take this road with the cars on it. It's a narrow road, and there's a lot of little sandwich stops along the way. So when you get out of the car and get a sandwich, and it holds up traffic. Them getting a sandwich, actually, that's good. If I'm driving and I'm hungry and I'm losing focus and there's nowhere clear to park anytime soon and there's a lot of pedestrians, probably better I eat a sandwich than continue to drive in a dangerous way where I can't really pay attention because I don't have calories in the brain. It's giving me brain fuel. Right. So that part is actually sort of good and interesting. But the fact that it holds up traffic, that's not good. So should I throw out the whole, should I close down all the sandwich shops in there? Or should I make it so cars can't go through there anymore or something like that and throw out the whole situation because of some bad thing about it? Well, no, there's good in it too. Let's take another example of recruiting. There is a guy who has qualities. Let's say I meet some fictional guy who has qualities about him that would make him a really good proponent of the spirituality in Judaism. But he has some certain things he does that are not so good. Should I reject the guy outright because he has some things that are not good? Or should I look at what's good about him? First just look at him objectively. And I see there are many good things about him when I do that, and I'm not just coming from a judgment standpoint. If I come at it from a judging him badly standpoint, God forbid, then I don't. Then all the good in him is tainted according to my viewpoint, even though the good in him that Hashem put there is perfectly pure, and it's not. There's no inherent taint to it that we couldn't elevate. If I look at him only like in this sort of hippy-dippy, sort of completely good way, well, then I won't see the actual issues that need to be rectified. I can't elevate the situation there. So I have to see what the situation is, and to elevate the situation. And so I have to look at the guy objectively first, and then I can see what are the genuinely good qualities about this guy, and where does he need some help. I think that might be a good place to call it for today.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank
It's much clearer now.
Now we see
Okay.
the two parts are based on.
That,
Stuff appreciates the superficial.
Right.
Being in the hand is worth eternity in the bush, so to speak.
good question.
I think I answered the question earlier. We said that even though the reality of the situation is that Jacob elevated himself, and Esau didn't actually lose anything because in the long term the world would be a better place with Jacob taking over, and so it would be better for Esau and his descendants too. Esau, he has a job to do in the story. He's sort of a guy, and he's sort of an actor too. He has to be the epitome of superficiality so that we can learn about that. Because if the Torah didn't teach us about the epitome of superficiality could show up and take us by surprise. So Esau, he's actually, I mean, you can think of all bad things in the Torah like a sports coach, that they go hard on you so you'll know what the other team's going to try to do. Esau, he knew what his job was. He could have actually argued and said, well, you took away my free will in this situation, Gazel Sadas. But he didn't do that. He played his role dutifully.
I mean, just to take that question a bit further, can you give us an example where looking at things superficially is a good thing?
I don't think that's the message of the lesson. The reason that Esau looked at things superficially is to show us the pitfalls of doing so. Now, okay, so I'll answer this question. When should we not look at things too deeply?
Right.
I think that's actually what Rebbe Nachman is talking about here and warning us that, by the way, looking at things a little more deeply than you're used to, well, it can be a trap. You need to do it to get the juice you need to elevate the situation, but it can be a trap. So there's a concept in Breslov that comes up in many lessons. It's all over the place in Likutei Moharan about the Tzimtzum. A very brief description of the Tzimtzum is the word basically means a reduction. Hashem had to reduce his infinite light in order to make a place for the world, and we can apply this lesson in our lives, which is that we need to set parameters for things. Like, for example, I'm going to read 1 page a day of this book, and that way I'll actually finish it. If I'm like, I'm going to read the whole book, well, maybe I'll just sit there for 5 hours and burn out and then never finish the book. But if I say I'm going to read a page a day, there's a very good chance I'll actually finish the book. Because that's a good. If I say I'm going to read a letter a day, that's a little outside of parameters. I can't even make sense out of 1 letter. I have to at least a word. Even then, we are creatures of sentences, not of individual words. So, like a page a day, that's a good amount it's not too little and not too much. That's an easy to understand example. Another example is how deeply shall I look at things? If I look at them too superficially, then I have the Esau problem of having to fight all the time. If I look at them too deeply, I'm just getting high in reality. So where's the balance where I like find this zone where I can get things done without as much resistance and reduce bad and increase good in a physically manifest way?
Very good. Shkoyach, shkoyach, shkoyach.
Just gotta go.